All right, today is the day, and we are right in the middle of today's video. We have done some work that we will be going back and showing you, but we're going to step in here now because I need to explain some things that are a lot easier for me to do in real time rather than me narrating over the work after it's done. So let me just step you right in here. We have here one of the main mounting points for the front subframe. There's a plate that sits right here, another one that comes in the bottom here. So this is one of the most reinforced areas, at least in the front bulkhead area. And we have been working on that. You'll see that everything's kind of blue now. I'm putting a little bit of a blue pigment into the resin so that when I go back across this thing, I know exactly where I have hit. Sometimes it gets to be confusing where you've gone and where you haven't, what layers are there or not. So as we'll step you back in just a moment, you can see putting on this layer of the blue. But we have stepped in here and now we're going to put another layer. Like I said, this is the mounting point. And so we have done some reinforcing on the bulkhead, onto this bulkhead. And so now we're going to step in and put some more layers in here. Now I have here a biaxial cloth. It is basically two unidirectional cloths woven together at 45-degree bias. And so this is going to come in here. I'll cut a bigger piece. But this needs to lap around the corners. Now it would be nigh impossible to actually cut piece of glass that could cover this whole thing. So we will be doing as big a section as we can, but to make sure that the strength is congruent all the way through those pieces that are lapped over each other, we will do one surface and they will lap over. And then we'll put another layer of cloth and it will hang over even a little bit further. And then I'll have one further piece of regular plain weave cloth to hold this whole thing down. And they will do the same thing, lapping double, triple up into here as well. And then when we come back, or as we've already done, another layer under here was done the same way. It lapped over. And each surface as we come back, they will lap over the next layer, adding extra reinforcement at the corners where most of the stresses lie. So anyway, we've done these first layers in blue. Now we're going to jump in and do this. Let's go do it. Now to get to these surfaces, we have to take the tub off the subframes once again. And the last time we had worked on here was building the tunnel and then doing some of the mechanical stuff here. That mechanical stuff needs to come apart, being that intercooler tubing that we had a few videos ago. It does attach to one point to the tub, so we're just going to pull the intercooler off. And there is another bearing for the drive shaft that kind of gets in the way whenever you try to take this off, so that has to be removed. So with Emerson's help, and of course the little shop helping dog, we'll get this thing lifted off. I'm going to set this thing up on its end so I can work at the top surface of that front bulkhead. And this tub weighing about 130 pounds right now, I guess I'll have to get a weight on it. As I said, the last thing we did on laminations here was building that tunnel, so we have not yet stripped all that sheet metal out, which formed or created our form to make the tunnel. So we're going to do that now, just to take all that sheet metal off. Little pieces of tape that held it together. And once that's out, we need to do some little bit of a trimming just to make all of our corner pieces nice and clean. We're even going to cut out a little piece of the floor here that sticks out past the tunnel, but because we want our future laminations to come across the floor and then go right straight into the tunnel. You see another piece there, it's a little bit lower that kind of sticks out. That will not be coming off. That is actually a flange that will be a transmission mount, so that'll be heavily reinforced later on. We're going to trim now in the area where we're going to be working today. That's this front bulkhead that the front subframe goes to. Like I said, same thing, just trimming that off so that we can have a 90-degree turn going from the bulkhead into the tunnel. And once it's all trimmed up, of course, we need to scuff the surface, do some sanding, knock down the high points, and clear all the resin off of the fiberglass. We want a frayed fiberglass edge or a surface so the next layers can bond right to the fiberglass layers below it. Also, we have this bare or exposed foam surface from the foam core in our floor panels. We're going to mix up a microsphere resin, a slurry, coat those up and sand those down as well. First, you won't see me sanding those because we're going to actually take this whole thing out in the yard and give it a washing, the Arete's first car wash. Because there is still a PVA releasing agent all over the surface of this car. In the tunnel, what we're particularly interested in right now, we need to make it clear. And all these other surfaces, I've left that release agent on there, a little bit of protection, or just I haven't had it out in the yard to clean it. So these 106-degree days, go out there and get some water on my dying lawn and get the car clean from release agent. Then back into the shop. We're going to start getting this thing ready to do our lamination by measuring and trimming all of our pieces of fiberglass. Now, the front bulkhead, it is going to be a layer of that bidirectional cloth and then 2 layers of plain weave cloth. The plain weave cloth will make the wrap around the, well, I should say that the biaxial makes 2 bends on the edges, but the plain weave will make a wrap around all of the corners and even up onto the bottom side of the dash. So we're going to get all these pieces all trimmed. And you'll see also that the plain weave cloth, although it does conform very well to 90-degree bends, there are some things in the way, like the bottom mounts for the subframe that go into the floor. They're kind of a compound curves when you've got multiple angles. So we'll be nipping and tucking, trimming all these pieces. Also clipping around those conduits that we're going to run our brake lines and electrical through. We'll get those, like I said, nip and tuck, all those pieces clean, ready to go. And we're going to put these pieces on dry and then put a resin on and work it through. Now, I haven't seen much of this. Usually I put resin down and then lay the cloth in the wet resin and move it around. And when you're trying to do this by putting the resin on dry fabric, sometimes it's good to pick up resins that are made for vacuum infusion. And they're a little bit thinner viscosity. But I am using medium viscosity, and we'll just work fast because we want to keep ahead of the curing cycle of the resin. When it starts to get into its cure cycle, it starts to thicken up a little bit and to get warmer, and you use that as a gauge to see how fast you have to go. I guess experience tells you how much I can mix. We're using about 12 ounces at a time is about all I can handle. Any more than that, of course, the mass in the pot makes it cure faster, plus any more than that, can't put it down fast enough. So we're going to put the resin down, you squeegee it around, and use the consolidation roller. And we'll get these footwell, or I should say wheel well bulkheads, and then we'll move on to that front main bulkhead. And just start working that resin in just as we have before on the sides there. You just put the resin down fairly thick and just let it soak in. Use the squeegee and the consolidating roller. The squeegee kind of just moves the air bubbles around, so the consolidating roller tends more to roll the resin down and let the air bubbles work their way up through the weave of the fiberglass. Now, talking about the resin curing, we want to make sure that this stuff doesn't start to thicken up, because as soon as it starts to thicken up, it's just not as easy to work through the cloth. So I'm going to gauge this by how much time I've got left, and so I'm going to switch and work on the edges rather than these big flat surface. I'll start tying down all these little nips and tucks, because I know as soon as that resin just shows any sign of thickening up, I can easily just go to the big flat surface and just dump the bucket out and squeegee it and roller it in. So I can empty the bucket in just a matter of a few minutes rather than the time it takes to do all these little nips and tucks, getting them lapped over the edge. So I've switched to do the edges, and then when I know that I need to get rid of that resin fast, I can just jump up, dump it down, squeegee it on. But we seem to be working just fine. It seems to be soaking in, working about the way we wanted it. Lots of little laps and joints to go around all these corners into these lower subframe mounts. And that's about the end of this lamination on this bulkhead. I didn't quite catch a video for the whole thing, so we're going to switch over to the main flat panels for the front side motor mounts. Subframe mounts. Putting on 2 layers of the biaxial cloth and 1 layer of the plain weave. The plain weave is just a lot better finish when you're doing your squeegee and stippling your resin into it. And the actual, once it's cured, a little better finish, a lot easier to sand. You know, that scuffing layer that we have to do to put on the next layers, it's always easier for that plain weave cloth. A lot smoother and easier. It's simply the same process of working the resin through. I do have the ability here to just kind of pick up these corners, put some resin on the bottom side, work them down. And then you'll see here that you can tell that the cloth is not fully saturated, where it's got kind of a white look to it. So I've like using the roller there and noticed that it just wasn't coming through, so put a little more resin on, step back, work another area, give it some time, and then you go back, consolidation roller, pushes that air out, and then you got a good saturated cloth. Now the last thing we're going to do is add a few little pieces of plain weave into some corners, up onto another corner, just to hold pieces of fabric that are just kind of poking up a little bit. Some smaller pieces work good to just kind of use as, like, I don't know, a band-aid, you could sort of say. Strap down some resin, keep it nice and flat. Also throw a piece that covers over there our conduits, help tie it a little bit better. And that's kind of gone by the same method before. We put some resin down, since this is a smaller piece. Stick it down with our fingers, never pushing it down long enough that it can soak through and get your fingers. But then jumping over, getting your brush and stippling, pressing it down. The very last thing is one tiny little piece keeps poking up at the back of that conduit. I'm going to cut a little 2 by 3 inch square, poke it down, and use it as another band-aid patch, and it will hold that little corner that's sticking up down. And there it is. That is one more step getting us towards getting that tub reinforced and built so that it has plenty of stiffness and strength to support our subframe, suspension, and all the power that will be moving through those pieces. So that is what we have for you today. We will be doing similar things on lamination through this whole thing. I will be jumping back and forth again between laminations and back onto some of the mechanical things here. Probably 2 to 1 working on the laminations, because that's going to be kind of a regular everyday routine for me here. Doing a little bit of a reinforcement here, a little bit there as I turn that tub over and under and upside down, and we'll be working inside and the outside too. So that's our video for today. We are glad that you're coming here and seeing our work and our progress. We're grateful for your patronage as you come and watch these videos. We hope that you subscribe and follow along in this project as we start to move it towards kind of a wrap-up, or as a lot of people say, we're 80% done, only 90% to go, but we will get there sooner than later. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Come back and see us again.